The great throne room of Nexus Prime buzzed with angry voices. Tall alien creatures with blue skin and sharp teeth filled the massive hall. Their leader, Emperor Cathara, sat on a throne made of black crystal. His eyes glowed red with fury. "Silence," the Emperor shouted. His voice echoed off the high walls. All the aliens stopped talking and looked at him. "We have a problem. A big problem." Admiral Xanthos stepped forward. He was the Emperor's best military leader. His blue skin had many scars from old battles. "What is it, my lord?" "The humans," Emperor Cathara said slowly. "They have ignored our message." A wave of shocked gasps filled the room. Commander Vextar, a younger alien with bright yellow eyes, spoke up. "Ignored it? That's impossible." "No one ignores the Valoran Empire." The Emperor stood up from his throne. He was very tall, almost 3 meters high. His crystal crown caught the light from the ceiling. 3 months ago, we sent them our demand. We told them to surrender their planet. We gave them time to think about it. We were being kind. "And?" Admiral Xanthos asked, though he already feared the answer. "Nothing," the Emperor said. "No response at all. Not even a no, they just ignored us." The alien council members looked at each other with worry. In all their history, this had never happened before. Every planet they had contacted had at least tried to fight back or beg for mercy. But humans, they acted like the message never came. General Thexmore, an old warrior with one missing arm, spoke from the back of the room. "Perhaps their communication systems are broken." "We checked," said the Emperor. "Their systems work fine. They talk to each other all day long. They send messages about food, weather, and strange things called memes. But our official demand for surrender? Nothing." Commander Vextar raised his hand. "My lord, maybe they don't understand how powerful we are. Should we show them our strength?" Emperor Cathara nodded slowly. "Yes, that must be it. They don't know who they're dealing with. How many ships do we have ready?" Admiral Xanthos pulled out a glowing tablet. 200 big warships, my lord. 50,000 fighter ships. 1 million soldiers. It's the biggest army we've ever put together." "Good," the Emperor said. "We'll show these humans what happens when you ignore the Valoran Empire. We'll make them famous across the galaxy. Other planets will hear about what we did to Earth, and they'll never dare ignore us again." The alien council members cheered and shouted their agreement. They had conquered 17 star systems. They had defeated armies that could destroy moons. Surely some small blue planet would be easy to handle. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Donghyun Kim sat at his desk in Seoul. He worked for a shipping company that moved containers around the world. His job was to figure out the best ways to send cargo from one place to another. Today, he had a problem. A big ship carrying electronics was stuck in the Suez Canal. Traffic was backing up and his boss wanted answers. Dong-Yun called his supervisor Hyejin. "What's the situation with container ship number KS7742? Dong-Yun looked at his computer screen. "It's still stuck. The canal authority says it might take 2 more days to clear the blockage." 2 days? Hyejin looked frustrated. "That's going to cost us a lot of money. Can we reroute the ship?" "I'm working on it," Dong-Yun said. He opened another program on his computer. "I think we can send it around the Cape of Good Hope instead. It will take longer, but at least it will be moving." Hyejin nodded and walked away. Dong-Yun went back to his work. He had spreadsheets to update, schedules to fix, and phone calls to make. It was a normal Tuesday morning. At 11:30, he took a coffee break. The coffee machine in break room A was working fine, but he heard that the one in break room B was broken again. 3rd time this month, he thought to himself. Back on Nexus Prime, the War Council was still meeting. Emperor Cathara had called in his best generals and admirals. They stood around a big holographic map of the galaxy. "Here," the Emperor pointed to a small yellow dot. "This is the human home system. They call it Sol. 1 star, 8 planets, and some rocks." Admiral Xanthos studied the map. "It looks very weak, my lord. No big defense stations, no military bases in nearby systems. Are we sure they're worth our attention?" "It's not about their strength," the Emperor explained. "It's about respect. If we let one species ignore us, others will try the same thing. We must make an example." General Thexmore nodded his old head. "The Emperor is right. Fear keeps our empire strong. If fear goes away, everything falls apart." Commander Vextar was looking at detailed scans of the Earth system. "My lord, I see something interesting. The humans have divided their planet into many small groups. They call them countries. They often fight each other over silly things. Perfect, said the Emperor with an evil smile. A divided enemy is a weak enemy. They won't be able to work together against us. The council members agreed. This would be easy. The humans were weak, divided, and apparently too stupid to respond to threats. The Valoran Empire would add another victory to their long list. When do we attack? Asked Admiral Zenthos. Emperor Kythera thought for a moment. Give the humans one more chance. Send another message. Make it very clear what will happen if they don't surrender. And if they ignore this one too, Commander Vextar asked. Then we show them the full power of the Valoran Empire, the Emperor said. Prepare the fleet. In 1 month we go to war. Back on Earth, Dongyun was finishing his lunch. He had solved the shipping problem and rerouted 3 container ships to avoid delays. His afternoon would be spent updating delivery schedules and answering emails from customers. He checked his phone for news. The main stories were about a soccer match, a new K-pop group, and some politician scandal. Nothing very exciting. At 3:15, he got an email about the broken coffee machine in break room B. Maintenance said they would fix it sometime next week. Dongyun made a note to bring his own coffee. Tomorrow. The Emperor's second message to Earth was, already on its way through space. It would arrive in 3 days. But like the first message, it would be received by an automated system, filed in the wrong folder and forgotten. The greatest war in galactic history was about to begin. One side was preparing with massive fleets and terrible weapons. The other side was worried about coffee machines and shipping delays. Neither side knew what they were really getting into. 3 months had passed since Emperor Kythera declared war on humanity. The biggest fleet in Valoran history was finally ready to move. Admiral Zenthos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Wrath of Stars. Around him, his crew worked at their stations, preparing for the jump to hyperspace. All ships report ready. Admiral? Said Lieutenant Kexai, his communications officer. Admiral Zenthos nodded. Through the big windows of his bridge, he could see the massive fleet stretching out in all directions. 200 giant warships, each one capable of destroying a city. 50,000 smaller fighter ships, fast and deadly. This was power that could conquer entire worlds. Begin the jump, he commanded. Space around the fleet twisted and bent. Stars became long lines of light. Then everything went quiet and dark. They were traveling faster than light, crossing the galaxy toward Earth. The journey took 2 weeks. When they finally arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system near the planet Neptune, Admiral Zenthos felt confident. Soon the humans would learn what it meant to ignore the Valoran Empire. Drop out of hyperspace, he ordered. The fleet appeared in normal space like a cloud of metal death. Sensors immediately began scanning the area, looking for human defenses. Commander Vexitar was studying the readings at his station. His yellow eyes grew wide with confusion. Admiral, this doesn't make sense. What is it? Admiral Zenthos walked over to look at the screen. I'm scanning for human military bases, weapon platforms, defense stations. The normal things we see when we attack a planet. Commander Vextar touched the screen, highlighting different areas. But I'm not finding much of anything. Nothing. The Admiral couldn't believe it. Check again. Expand the search. I am checking, sir. There are some small research stations, a few mining ships collecting ice from the outer planets, but no weapons, no big military bases, no defense fleets. Admiral Zenthos felt worried. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. Every species built defenses around their home world. It was basic survival. Maybe they're hiding, he said. Scan for cloaked ships. Look for hidden bases on the moons and asteroids. For the next 6 hours, the Valoran fleet searched everywhere. They found more research stations, some communication satellites, and lots of space junk. But no hidden weapons. No secret fleets. No signs that humanity was ready for war. Lieutenant Kexai approached the Admiral with another report. Sir, we've intercepted some of their communications. The humans are still talking about normal things. Sports, weather, something called social media drama. No mention of our fleet at all. Impossible, Admiral Zenthos said. Our ships are huge. Even their primitive sensors should detect us by now. That's the strange part, sir. They do have sensors pointed at space. But they seem to be looking for rocks and ice, not enemy fleets. Their military communications are very quiet. Almost like they don't have a military. Down on Earth, marine biologist Yoonji Park was 3 weeks into her research trip in the Pacific Ocean. She loved her job. Every day brought new discoveries in the deep ocean. Today she was exploring thermal vents on the ocean floor, using a small submarine called a submersible. Her research partner, Minho Choi, was with her. They worked well together, and this trip was going better than expected. They had already found 2 new species of fish and some interesting bacteria. "Yoonji, look at this," Minho said, pointing to one of their instruments. "There's something strange on the sonar." Yoonji was busy collecting samples with the submarine's robot arm. "Strange how?" "There's a big metal object about 2 kilometers above us. It showed up about an hour ago." Yoonji glanced at the sonar screen. She could see a large, dark shape floating in the water above them. "Probably space junk," she said without much interest. "NASA is always launching stuff and sometimes pieces fall back down." "It's pretty big," Minho said, "and it's not sinking. Just floating there. Could be an old satellite," Yoonji suggested. She was more interested in the strange purple fish swimming near the thermal vent. "The government is supposed to clean that stuff up, but you know how slow they are." What Yoonji and Minho didn't know was that the space junk was actually a Valoran scout ship. It had been following their submarine for hours, trying to figure out if they were military personnel or scientists. The aliens were very confused by what they were seeing. Back on the scout ship, Captain Nexfor was reporting to Admiral Zenthos. "Sir, we've been watching 2 humans in a small underwater vehicle. They appear to be collecting fish." "Fish?" Admiral Zenthos couldn't hide his confusion. "Are you sure?" "Yes, sir. They have containers full of sea creatures. They're taking pictures and making notes. It looks like scientific research. Maybe it's a cover story," the Admiral suggested. "Maybe they're really mapping the ocean floor for military purposes." "I don't think so, sir. We've been listening to their communications. They're talking about bacteria and water temperature. Very boring stuff." Admiral Zenthos was getting frustrated. Nothing about this invasion was going according to plan. "What about their government? Are they preparing for war?" Lieutenant Kexhai had been monitoring Earth's communications networks all day. "Sir, I've been tracking their news and government broadcasts. Most of their leaders seem to be arguing about taxes and elections. Some of them are discussing climate change and trade agreements, but no one is talking about us." "Maybe they're keeping it secret," suggested Commander Vextar. "Maybe they don't want to cause panic." "I thought about that too," Lieutenant Kexhai replied. "But their communication security is very weak. We can read almost everything they send. If they knew we were here, we would see some sign of it." Admiral Zenthos walked to the big window of his bridge. Outside he could see his massive fleet waiting for orders. 200 warships ready to fight. But who were they supposed to fight? "Sir," Commander Vextar said quietly, "what if they really haven't noticed us?" "That's impossible," the Admiral said. "We're the biggest fleet in galactic history. We have ships the size of cities. How could they not notice?" "I don't know, sir. But look at the evidence. No military response. No panic in their communications. Their leaders are still arguing about normal politics. Either they're the best actors in the galaxy, or they really don't know we're here." Down in the Pacific Ocean, Yoonji was finishing her work for the day. She and Minho had collected enough samples and would head back to the surface soon. "That metal thing is still up there," Minho mentioned, checking the sonar again. "Still there?" Yoonji was a little more interested now. "That's weird. Space junk usually sinks or floats away." "Maybe we should report it," Minho suggested. Yoonji thought about it. "We can mention it in our daily report to the research station, but I don't think it's urgent. Probably just some old military satellite or something." As their submersible began rising toward the surface, the Valoran scout ship followed at a safe distance. Captain Nexivor was still trying to understand what he had witnessed. These humans seemed completely unaware that the most powerful military force in the galaxy was watching them. "Captain," his sensor officer called out, "the humans are surfacing. Should we follow?" "Keep your distance," Captain Nexivor ordered. "We don't want to reveal ourselves yet." But as he watched the small human research vessel disappear toward the horizon, he began to wonder if revealing themselves would even matter. These humans seemed so focused on their own small world that they might not notice an entire alien fleet, even if it landed in their backyard. Admiral Zenthos was reaching the same conclusion. After a full day of scanning and monitoring, his fleet had found no evidence that humanity was aware of their presence. It was the strangest thing he had ever experienced in decades of military service. "Sir," Commander Vextar approached him with another report. "I've been thinking about our next move. And maybe we should try a different approach. Instead of looking for their military, maybe we should try to get their attention first, make them notice us." Admiral Zenthos considered this idea. It went against every military strategy he had ever learned. Usually, surprise was their greatest weapon. But surprise didn't work if the enemy never realized they were under attack. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "A demonstration, sir. Something visible. Something they can't ignore." The Admiral nodded slowly. Tomorrow they would try something that no Velaran fleet had ever done before. They would announce their presence and hope the humans would finally pay attention. In her small cabin on the research ship, Yunji was writing her daily report. Under unusual observations, she noted, "Large metallic object detected on sonar at depth marker 7. Possibly space debris. Recommend notification to relevant authorities." Then she went to bed, completely unaware that she had just become the first human to detect an alien invasion. Admiral Zenthos had spent 2 weeks studying Earth from a distance. His fleet of warships hid behind Neptune, watching and waiting. The humans still showed no signs of knowing they were there. It was time for a more direct approach. "Commander Vextar," the Admiral called across the bridge. "Have you found a good target for our demonstration?" Commander Vextar brought up a holographic display showing Earth. Red dots marked various locations around the planet. "We've identified several possibilities, sir. There's a military base in North America, a government building in Europe, and some kind of research facility in Antarctica." "Tell me about the research facility," Admiral Zenthos said. "It's interesting, sir. Very isolated. Only 6 buildings, but it has a large communication array and several sensor dishes. Our intelligence analysis suggests it might be a disguised military command center." Admiral Zenthos studied the images. The buildings looked small and simple, but appearances could be deceiving. "What makes you think it's military?" "The communication equipment is very advanced for such a remote location. They're constantly sending and receiving data. And look at this." Commander Vextar pointed to the display. "They have sensors pointed at the sky. They must be watching for threats from space." "Perfect," the Admiral decided. "A hidden command center disguised as a science station. The humans think they're being clever, but we see through their deception." The plan was simple but effective. A small strike force would attack the facility with overwhelming power. The humans would finally understand that the Valoran Empire meant business. News of the attack would spread across their planet, and soon their leaders would be begging for mercy. "How many ships do we need for this operation?" Admiral Zenthos asked. "For 6 small buildings? 1 ship would be enough," Commander Vextar replied. "But if we want to make an impression, I suggest 12 dreadnoughts and 300 fighters." "Excellent. Make it so." In Antarctica, research meteorologist Hyunwoo Lee was having a frustrating morning. The weather monitoring station had been running smoothly for months, but today everything seemed to be going wrong. "Jiwon," he called to his colleague across the main building. "The backup generator is making that weird noise again." Jiwon Kang looked up from her computer. She was analyzing wind patterns over the South Pole, trying to understand how climate change was affecting Antarctica. "Which weird noise? The grinding sound or the high-pitched whine?" "The grinding sound. I think the fuel filter needs to be replaced." "Great," Jiwon sighed. "Add it to the list. We also need to fix the heating system in Building 3, replace the broken window in the communications room, and figure out why the coffee maker is only making cold coffee." Hyunwoo laughed. "At least we have coffee. Remember last month when the supply plane couldn't land for 2 weeks?" "Don't remind me," Jiwon said. "I thought Minsu was going to start a revolt over the lack of proper food." The weather station was home to 8 researchers who took turns staying for 6-month periods. Their job was to collect data about Antarctic weather patterns, atmospheric conditions, and climate changes. It was important work, but it could be lonely and boring. The station had 6 main buildings: a laboratory, living quarters, communications center, generator building, equipment storage, and a small greenhouse where they tried to grow fresh vegetables. Everything was connected by covered walkways to protect against the harsh Antarctic weather. "Hyunwoo," Jiwon called out again. "I'm getting some strange readings on the atmospheric sensors. Can you check the calibration?" "What kind of strange readings?" "High-energy particles in the upper atmosphere. Either our equipment is broken or something unusual is happening up there. Hyunwoo walked over to her station. The numbers on her screen did look odd. Could be a solar flare, he suggested. Or maybe interference from the aurora. What they didn't know was that the high-energy particles were actually the exhaust from Valoran warships entering Earth's atmosphere. 12 massive dreadnoughts were descending from orbit, their weapons systems charging up for the attack. Captain Thoros commanded the strike force from his flagship, Death's Edge. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Destroy the human command center, send a message, and return to the fleet. He had destroyed much larger targets with much smaller forces. Target acquired, his weapons officer reported. 6 buildings exactly as described in the intelligence briefing. Through the view screen, Captain Thoros could see the tiny Antarctic research station. It looked pathetic. 6 small buildings sitting in the middle of endless white ice. But he knew that appearances could be deceiving. The humans had hidden their real military strength well. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "should we scan for hidden defenses?" "Do it," Captain Thoros ordered. "These humans are clever. They might have weapons hidden underground." The deep scans revealed nothing unusual. No underground bunkers, no hidden missile silos, no shield generators. Just 6 simple buildings and some scientific equipment. "Maybe the weapons are in the buildings themselves," Captain Thoros suggested, "disguised as research equipment." "Possible, sir." "Orders?" Captain Thoros considered his options. Emperor Kythera had ordered a demonstration of power. The strike had to be impressive enough to get the humans' attention, but not so destructive that it prevented them from surrendering. "Begin with precision strikes. Target the generator building and the communications array. Let's see how they respond." Down at the weather station, Hyunwoo was checking the backup generator when everything went wrong at once. The lights flickered, the building shook, and he heard a loud explosion from outside. "What was that?" he shouted, but there was no answer. The main power had gone out. He ran outside and saw smoke rising from the generator building. Or what was left of it. The small structure had been completely destroyed, leaving only a smoking crater in the ice. "Ji-won," he called, running toward the main laboratory. "Are you okay?" Ji-won appeared in the doorway, looking confused and scared. "What happened?" "It sounded like an explosion." "The generator building is gone," Hyunwoo said. "Completely gone. There's nothing left but a hole in the ground." "Gone? How can it be gone?" They stood together, staring at the smoking crater where their backup generator used to be. The main building still had power from the primary generator, but without the backup system, they were in a dangerous situation. "Could it have been a mechanical failure?" Ji-won asked. "Maybe the fuel tank exploded?" "I don't think so," Hyunwoo said. "The explosion came from above, not inside the building. And look at the crater. It's too clean, too round. This wasn't an accident." High above them, Captain Thoros was waiting for a response. His sensors showed that the humans were still alive and moving around the remaining buildings. Surely they would try to send a distress call or activate some kind of defense system. "Any communications from the target?" he asked. "Nothing yet, sir. They're using short-range radio to talk to each other, but no long-distance messages." "What are they saying?" His communications officer listened for a moment. "They seem confused, sir. They're discussing mechanical failure and talking about repair procedures." Captain Thoros couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Mechanical failure? We just attacked them with planet-killer weapons and they think it was mechanical failure? That's what it sounds like, sir." "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted, "should we continue the attack?" "The communications array is still intact." Captain Thoros hesitated. This wasn't going according to plan. The humans were supposed to be terrified. They should be sending emergency messages to their government, calling for help, or at least acknowledging that they were under attack. Instead, they were standing around looking confused. "Target the communications array," he decided. "Maybe that will get their attention." The second strike was even more precise than the first. A beam of pure energy sliced through the tall radio antenna, cutting it in half. The top section crashed into the snow with a loud metallic bang. Hyunwoo and Ji-won watched their main communication system fall apart. Now they were really in trouble. With no backup generator and no long-range communications, they were completely cut off from the outside world. "This can't be a coincidence," Ji-won said. "First the generator, now the radio. Someone is attacking us, but who?" Hyunwoo asked. "And why? We're just weather researchers. What could anyone want with us?" "Maybe it's a test," Ji-won suggested. Maybe our own government is testing our emergency procedures. That's a pretty extreme test. They destroyed our backup power and our radio. Captain Thoris was growing increasingly frustrated. His strike force had delivered 2 perfect attacks, destroying exactly what they intended to destroy. But the humans still weren't responding appropriately. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "they're trying to use their emergency backup radio now. Short range only." "What are they saying?" "They're calling their supply depot, asking for a maintenance crew to come fix their equipment." "Maintenance crew?" Captain Thoros couldn't hide his disbelief. "They think we're a maintenance problem?" "It appears so, sir." For the next 6 hours, Captain Thoros's strike force circled the research station, waiting for some kind of military response. They scanned for approaching aircraft, monitored radio frequencies, and watched for any sign that the humans understood what was happening, but nothing came. The researchers spent their time documenting. Emperor Cathara was not pleased. Admiral Zenthos stood before the throne, delivering his report about the Antarctic attack. The Emperor's red eyes glowed brighter with each word. "Let me understand this correctly," the Emperor said slowly. "You destroyed their command center and they thought it was broken equipment." "Yes, my lord. They filed a maintenance request." "A maintenance request." The Emperor's voice was dangerously quiet. "The greatest military force in galactic history attacked them, and they called for a repairman." "That appears to be correct, my lord." Emperor Cathara stood up from his crystal throne. He was so angry that the air around him seemed to shimmer with heat. "This is unacceptable. No species has ever shown such disrespect to the Valoran Empire." "My lord," Admiral Zenthos said carefully, "I don't think they meant to be disrespectful. I think they genuinely don't understand what's happening. Then we will make them understand." The Emperor roared, "Bring the entire fleet to their moon. I want every ship visible from their planet. I want weapons demonstrations that will light up their night sky. If subtlety doesn't work, we'll try overwhelming force." 3 days later, the largest armada in galactic history arrived at Earth's moon. 200 massive warships took position in orbit, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. The fleet was so large that it could be seen from Earth as a bright cluster of moving stars. Emperor Kithara himself came aboard his personal flagship, the Final Dominion. It was the most powerful ship ever built, capable of cracking planets in half. If this didn't get the humans' attention, nothing would. "Begin the demonstration," the Emperor commanded from his throne room. What followed was the most spectacular weapons display in military history. Energy beams carved massive trenches across the lunar surface, spelling out messages in letters hundreds of kilometers wide. The words, "Surrender now," blazed across the moon in text visible from Earth with simple telescopes. Plasma cannons fired into empty space, creating artificial auroras that painted the sky in brilliant colors. Fighter squadrons performed complex formations, while their engines left glowing trails against the black of space. For 3 days and nights, the Valoran fleet put on a show of power that could be seen across half the galaxy. Surely this would finally make the humans pay attention. On Earth, astronomy student Seoyeon Yoon was working late in the Seoul National University Observatory. She was finishing her graduate thesis on lunar surface changes, and she had been tracking some unusual activity around the moon for the past week. "Professor Taehyun," she called to her advisor, who was reading papers at his desk. "I need to show you something strange." Professor Taehyun-oh looked up from his work. He was an experienced astronomer who had seen many unusual things in space, but he trusted Seoyeon's observations. She was one of his best students. "What is it?" he asked, walking over to her computer. "Look at these images of the lunar surface from the past 3 days." Seoyeon pulled up a series of photographs. "See these bright lines? They weren't there last week." Professor Taehyun adjusted his glasses and studied the images carefully. The moon's surface showed what appeared to be geometric patterns carved into the rock. They were too regular to be natural formations, but they were also enormous. "Interesting," he said. "Could be reflection patterns from solar panels on one of the space stations." "That's what I thought at first," Seoyeon said. "But look at the size scale. These patterns are hundreds of kilometers long. No space station is that big." Professor Taehyun considered other possibilities. "What about mining operations? I heard the Americans and Chinese both have new projects up there." "Maybe," Seoyeon said, though she didn't sound convinced. "But the patterns appeared so suddenly. Usually mining operations take months or years to create changes this visible. Well, write it up in your thesis as an observation, Professor Taehyun suggested. Note the unusual surface changes and suggest follow-up research. But don't spend too much time on it. Your thesis defense is next week, and you should focus on your main research. Seoyeon nodded and returned to her work. She made a note to mention the lunar surface changes in her conclusions, but she had more important things to worry about. Graduate school was stressful enough without chasing every unusual observation. Meanwhile, in the city of Busan, social media influencer Jinwoo Park was doing a live stream from the beach. He had thousands of followers who watched his daily videos about food, travel, and life in South Korea. Okay, everyone, Jinwoo said to his phone camera. Tonight I'm going to try the best seafood restaurant in Busan, but first, let me show you this amazing sunset. He turned the camera toward the ocean, where the sun was setting behind some clouds. The sky was painted in beautiful shades of orange and pink. Jinwoo, one of his viewers, wrote in the chat, "Look at the moon. There are weird lights around it." Jinwoo glanced up at the sky. The moon was visible even though it wasn't fully dark yet. There did seem to be some kind of glow around it and occasionally bright flashes of light. "Oh yeah, I can see that," Jinwoo said casually. "Probably just satellites or space junk or something. The government is always launching stuff into space these days." "Looks like fireworks," another viewer commented. "Maybe it's some kind of celebration," Jinwoo suggested. "Anyway, let's go eat some delicious seafood. I heard this restaurant has the best raw crab in the city." He walked away from the beach, completely uninterested in the light show happening above his head. His viewers' comments about the moon quickly got buried under discussions about food and restaurant recommendations. Up on the moon, Emperor Kithara was watching the Earth through powerful telescopes. He expected to see cities in panic, military forces mobilizing, and leaders making desperate attempts to contact his fleet. Instead, he saw normal city lights, regular traffic patterns, and absolutely no signs of alarm. "Admiral," he called to Zenthos, "are you certain our demonstration is visible from Earth?" "Absolutely, my lord. Our energy output is bright enough to be seen in daylight. Anyone with basic optical equipment should be able to detect our presence." "Then why aren't they responding?" Admiral Zenthos consulted his intelligence reports. "Our monitoring stations have been intercepting their communications for 3 days, my lord. Most of their conversations are about normal daily activities. Work, family, entertainment, food. What about their governments? Surely their military leaders have noticed us. Their official government communications mention some unusual astronomical activity, but they seem to think it's related to solar flares or space weather." Emperor Kithara couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Space weather? We're carving messages into their moon with weapons that could destroy continents, and they think it's weather?" "It appears so, my lord." Commander Vextar approached with another report. "My lord, we've identified what might be the problem. The humans appear to have a very limited attention span for things outside their immediate environment." "Explain." "Their communication networks are full of information, but most of it is about local events, personal relationships, and entertainment. They seem to categorize anything unusual as either someone else's responsibility or probably not important." "Are you telling me," the Emperor said slowly, "that they're ignoring the greatest military force in galactic history because they're too busy watching entertainment programs?" "That's a simplified way to put it, but yes, my lord." Emperor Kithara walked to the great window of his throne room. Outside he could see his magnificent fleet arranged in perfect formation. These were ships that had conquered star systems, defeated armies that could shatter moons, and struck fear into civilizations across the galaxy. But the small blue planet below continued its peaceful rotation, completely unaware of the force that could end its existence in minutes. "Sir," Admiral Zenthos said quietly, "perhaps we should try a different approach." "What do you suggest?" "Direct communication, my lord. Instead of demonstrations of force, maybe we should simply introduce ourselves." The Emperor considered this idea. It went against every tradition of Velaran conquest. They had never needed to introduce themselves before. Fear had always been enough. And if they ignore our introduction the same way they've ignored everything else? Admiral Zenthos hesitated before answering. "Then, my lord, I think we may need to accept that this species is unique. On Earth, life continued exactly as it had for months." Seoyeon submitted her thesis with a brief note about unusual lunar surface changes. Jinwoo posted videos about the best seafood in Busan. Professor Taehyun graded papers and planned next semester's courses. None of them knew that their planet was under siege by an alien empire. None of them realized that their complete indifference to cosmic events had just achieved what no military force in galactic history had ever managed. They had confused an interstellar superpower into questioning its own methods. Emperor Kythera spent the night staring at Earth, trying to understand how such a small, primitive world could be so completely immune to intimidation. For the first time in his long reign, he was beginning to doubt whether the Valoran Empire was as terrifying as he had always believed. The greatest war in galactic history was turning into the greatest misunderstanding instead. 6 months had passed since the Valoran Empire declared war on humanity. Admiral Zenthos walked through the corridors of the final dominion toward Emperor Kythera's private chambers. In his hands, he carried a report that would change everything. The report was thick, filled with analysis from the Empire's best minds. Psychologists, military strategists, and intelligence experts had all studied the human species for months. Their conclusion was unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral Zenthos paused outside the Emperor's door. In all his years of service, he had never delivered news like this. He took a deep breath and knocked. "Enter," came the Emperor's voice from within. The private chamber was smaller than the main throne room, but still impressive. Crystal walls reflected light from floating orbs that provided gentle illumination. Emperor Kythera sat behind a simple desk, reading reports from across his empire. "Admiral," the Emperor said without looking up, "I trust you have good news about our war with the humans." "My lord," Admiral Zenthos began carefully, "I have news. Whether it is good news? That depends on how you look at it." Emperor Kythera finally raised his eyes from his papers. "Explain!" Admiral Zenthos placed his report on the desk. "Our Psychological Warfare Division has completed their comprehensive analysis of human behavior, my lord. The results are unique. Go on. The humans are not ignoring us as a military strategy, my lord. They genuinely haven't noticed that we're here." The Emperor stared at his admiral for several long moments. "That's impossible. I thought so too, my lord. But after 6 months of observation, there's no other explanation. The human species appears to have a remarkable ability to focus only on things that directly affect their daily lives." Admiral Zenthos opened the report and began reading key sections. "According to our analysis, humans categorize most unusual events into 2 groups: someone else's problem or probably nothing important. Since our presence doesn't directly interfere with their work, family or entertainment, they simply ignore us. But we destroyed their research station. We carved messages into their moon. We've been conducting weapons demonstrations for months." "Yes, my lord. And they've explained all of those things as equipment failures, natural phenomena, or activities by their own governments. Their ability to rationalize away anything that doesn't fit their worldview is impressive." Emperor Kythera stood up and walked to the window. Outside, his magnificent fleet continued its patrol around Earth's moon. "What about their technology? Can't their instruments detect our ships?" "That's another interesting discovery, my lord. Their technology is much more primitive than we assumed. Most of their sensors are designed to look for rocks, ice, and space debris. They're not really looking for enemy fleets. And when they do detect us, they assume we're natural phenomena or equipment malfunctions. We've been monitoring their communication networks. When their instruments show unusual readings, they usually blame it on solar interference or mechanical problems." The Admiral continued reading from his report. "There's more, my lord. The humans appear to have an extremely limited attention span for anything outside their immediate environment. Their communication networks are full of information, but 90% of it involves personal relationships, entertainment, local news, and food. Food? They spend an enormous amount of time discussing what they eat, my lord. We estimate that food-related conversations take up more of their communication bandwidth than military or government topics." Emperor Kythera returned to his desk and sat down heavily. "Are you telling me that we've been at war with a species that cares more about food than defense?" "In simple terms, yes, my lord." The Emperor picked up the report and began reading it himself. Page after page of analysis, examples, and conclusions all pointed to the same impossible truth. Humanity had not been defeated by the Valoran Empire. Humanity had simply failed to notice that a war was happening. "What do our experts recommend?" the Emperor asked. Admiral Zenthos hesitated. They suggest several options, my lord. We could try direct communication. Send them a message that clearly states who we are and what we want. And if they ignore that too, then our experts suggest we find a different target, my lord. A species that will at least acknowledge our existence. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. Outside his window, Earth continued its slow rotation, looking peaceful and completely unaware of the force that surrounded it. Meanwhile, on that small blue planet, life continued as normal. In Seoul, shipping coordinator Dong-Yun Kim was finishing his weekly report. The container ship crisis had been resolved months ago, and now he was dealing with new challenges. Dong-Yun, his supervisor Hyejin, called across the office. How's the situation with that delayed shipment from Indonesia? Almost sorted out, Dong-Yun replied, checking his computer. The ship should dock in Busan tomorrow morning. I've arranged for expedited processing through customs. Good work. By the way, did you hear they finally fixed the coffee machine in break room B? Really, about time. That thing has been broken for months. Dong-Yun saved his work and looked out the window at the city skyline. Seoul looked the same as always, bustling with traffic and people going about their daily business. He had no idea that alien emperors were discussing his planet's fate just a few 100,000 kilometers above his head. In his maintenance report for the month, Dong-Yun noted, minor equipment issues resolved, coffee machine operational, productivity expected to improve. Back on the final Dominion, Emperor Kythera was meeting with his full war council. All of his top generals and admirals were present, and they were discussing something that had never happened before in Valoran history. Retreat? General Thexmore asked in disbelief. My lord, the Valoran Empire has never retreated from any battle. This isn't a battle, the Emperor replied. I'm not sure what this is. Commander Vextar spoke up. My lord, perhaps we should consider this a learning experience. We've discovered a new type of defense, complete indifference. It's not a defense, Admiral Zenthos corrected. It's just how they are. They're not trying to ignore us. They literally don't notice us, and how is that possible? General Thexmore demanded. We have the largest fleet in galactic history sitting on their doorstep. Because, the Emperor said slowly, they're too busy worrying about coffee machines and shipping schedules to look up at the sky. The room fell silent. Every military officer present had spent their lives conquering planets through force and intimidation. The idea that a species could be immune to both was almost impossible to accept. Sir, Commander Vextar said finally, what are your orders? Emperor Kythera looked around the room at his officers. These were warriors who had defeated armies and conquered star systems. But none of them had any idea how to fight an enemy that didn't know they were enemies. We withdraw, the Emperor decided, quietly. We return to Valoran space and we never speak of this again. My lord, Admiral Zenthos asked, what do we tell the other species in our empire? They'll want to know what happened to the humans. We tell them that the human homeworld was unsuitable for conquest, too primitive to be worth our time. And the truth? The truth stays in this room, forever. One by one, the Valoran warships began leaving Earth orbit. They departed quietly, without fanfare, like ghosts disappearing into the night. The greatest military force in galactic history slipped away from Earth the same way they had arrived, completely unnoticed. On Earth, marine biologist Yoonji Park was finishing her 6-month research expedition. She had discovered 4 new species, published 3 papers, and collected enough data to keep her busy for years. As her research ship headed back to port, she checked her final reports. Under unusual observations, she had noted, periodic sonar contacts with unidentified objects during weeks 315. Objects appeared metallic but showed no signs of artificial propulsion. Possibly debris from recent satellite launches. Recommend improved space junk cleanup procedures. Her research partner Minho looked at the note. You know, I never did figure out what those things were. Probably just space junk, Yoonji said. NASA launches so much stuff these days. Some of it's bound to fall back down eventually. At least it's someone else's problem now, Minho said. Exactly. In the depths of space, the Valoran fleet regrouped near Neptune for their final departure from the solar system. Emperor Kythera stood on the bridge of his flagship, taking one last look at the small blue planet that had defeated his empire without firing a single shot. Sir, Admiral Zenthos approached quietly. The fleet is ready for the jump to hyperspace. Admiral, the Emperor said, in your professional opinion, what have we learned from this experience? Admiral Xanthos thought carefully before answering. That fear only works if your enemy is capable of being afraid, my lord. And that sometimes the strongest defense is simply not caring enough to notice you're being attacked. Indeed, and what does this mean for the future of the Valoran Empire? I think, my lord, that we need to be more careful about choosing our targets. Perhaps we should stick to species that will at least acknowledge our existence. Emperor Cathera nodded. Begin the jump, Admiral, and find us a planet full of beings who appreciate the finer points of military conquest. As the Valoran fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Earth continued its peaceful rotation. In Sol,